Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the bride of Bill Weasley and French quarter-Veela, Fleur Delacour. More specifically, however, we're going to be discussing her performance during the Triwizard tournament in the Goblet of Fire. Fleur was a talented witch and a student of Beauxbatons. In fact, she was chosen as her school's champion. So why did she keep getting the short end of the stick? What gives? The Triwizard tournament is a contest like no other, an event dating back more than 700 years that tests the intelligence, courage, and strength of those participating. Since its inception, the contest has gone forward every 5 years, with a brief 200-year pause due to all 3 champions being injured in 1792. Typically, the tournament featured 3 champions, one from each of the 3 largest wizarding schools in Europe: Durmstrang, Beauxbatons, and Hogwarts. These school champions would then take place in 3 brutal challenges, 3 participants, 3 challenges, hence Triwizard tournament. The prize for the tournament was eternal glory, 1,000 galleons, and the famed Triwizard Cup. However, Harry Potter sort of unintentionally broke this mold, as during his time at Hogwarts, his name was thrown in as an extra participant. In the year that Harry participated, there were 4: Harry Potter, Victor Krum, Cedric Diggory, and the focus of this video, Fleur Delacour. Accounts of the tournament vary a little from book to film, but the general idea of the tournament was the same: 3 challenges. One other constant was Fleur's performance, which quite frankly wasn't there, as she tailed behind the other 3 participants for the duration of the tournament. The first challenge was to retrieve a golden egg from one of 4 immensely powerful and dangerous dragons. Each champion was paired with a dragon and ended up obtaining the egg in their own unique way. Harry opted to take advantage of his flying skills. Krum utilized a conjunctivitis curse, Cedric used transfiguration, and Fleur, who faced a common Welsh green, chose to enchant the dragon to sleep. Everyone was successful in obtaining the egg. However, for some, it was not without hiccups. Though Fleur's enchantment worked and the dragon was put to sleep, she faced issues when the dragon snored, releasing a jet of flame. This jet of flame set her skirt alight, but she was still able to put the flames out and retrieve her egg. Fleur's issues resulted in a 4th place finish, last. The second challenge was at the Great Lake, a challenge involving water, merpeople, and something that the participants would sorely miss. The thing that the participants would miss, however, ended up being important people in their lives. Strangely enough, Hermione was Krum's rescuee, Ron was Harry's, Cho Chang was Cedric's, and Gabrielle, her younger sister, was Fleur's. Given 1 hour, the participants were tasked with saving these individuals, and once again, each ended up pursuing it in their own individual way. Though Fleur figured out how to breathe underwater, she still had considerable difficulty with the challenge. In fact, Harry ended up saving more than his own champion out of fear that they would die if left unsaved. Harry looked around, waiting. Where were Fleur and Krum? Time was getting short and, according to the song, the hostages would be lost after an hour. Because Fleur hadn't yet arrived to save her sister, Harry acted hastily, thinking that she would die if he didn't take action. Harry's selflessness meant that he ended up with the 3rd place finish. However, that placing was later revised to 2nd for showing moral fiber. Fleur once again finished in last. Going into the 3rd task, Harry and Diggory were tied for 1st, Krum was 2nd, and Fleur was in 3rd, aka 4th, aka last. The 3rd task involved a 20-foot high maze full of obstacles, riddles, and creatures. Participants would have to circumnavigate the maze, overcome the obstacles, and claim the Triwizard Cup. From there, the winner would bask in eternal glory. Things didn't look good for Fleur, however, as she went into the 3rd task with 2 4th place finishes under her belt. In the end, Fleur got last in this challenge as well, though I'm sure it could be argued that Cedric, the boy who died, had the biggest loss that day. Because she was in last place entering the 3rd task, she was last to enter the maze, behind Cedric, Harry, and Victor. In the end, Harry and Cedric raced to the Triwizard Cup together, sharing 1st place, just before being transported to the Little Hangleton graveyard. Fleur, on the other hand, didn't make it far in the maze at all, as fake Alistair Moody, aka Barty Crouch Jr., couldn't help but meddle with the tournament. Upon entering the maze, Fleur was stunned by Crouch Jr., eliminating any chance she ever had of winning. Not that it was looking good anyway. So why did Fleur perform so badly? Well, it was for a variety of reasons. In the first challenge, Fleur simply got unlucky, putting the dragon to sleep is a totally valid way of approaching that challenge, and her ability to put the dragon to sleep in the first place speaks volumes to her magical ability. I completely understand why she approached the dragon challenge in that way, and in my opinion, her mishap doesn't indicate any level of incompetence. So challenge number 1, Fleur was just unlucky, nothing more. The second challenge, however, was Fleur's fault. She performed the worst there, and that's not because she isn't talented, but it's because someone has to perform the worst, and the competition was fierce. The Triwizard tournament has high stakes, particularly the second challenge, where the participants were under the impression that this was a life or death situation, at least Harry was. Some people just crumble under pressure, and I think that's what happened to Fleur here. As far as she was concerned, her little sister was in grave danger, and I think that the pressure was just too much for her. I think, if anything, the second challenge is the best indication of why I think that Fleur deserves her last place finish. It's not that she isn't a good person, or that she isn't magically talented, but she simply performed the worst here. However, with all of that said, let's not ignore the elephant in the room here. Harry had a lot of help. Not only that, but at this stage of the books, Fleur had the weakest relationship to Harry of all of the competitors, and had the least influence on the narrative. This is where the Doyleist or Authorial Perspective should be considered. The idea that certain plot points and the development of the story are largely influenced by the real-world motivations of the story's creator. Harry was always going to win the tournament. I don't think that you could argue that. He's the main protagonist, the books are named after him, and if he lost, it should all be a bit tragic. This means that the only unknown to the reader is who will take second, third, and fourth place. In this sort of situation, these next positions are, whether you like it or not, influenced by how relevant the characters are to the story. Fleur getting last doesn't necessarily mean that she was the worst, though she may have been. It just means that she had the smallest connection to Harry, our main protagonist, at this point in the story. Cedric was always going to tie for first with Harry, because Cedric's destiny was preordained. He was destined to travel to the Little Hankleton graveyard alongside Harry, where he would later die. Okay, so that now means that the first and second slots are occupied. This leaves only third and fourth place, and these positions were basically decided by Fake Moody. One of them was going to be stunned, and another was going to be put under the Imperius Curse, and it just so happened that Fleur was the one who was stunned. Bearing this in mind, let's briefly take a look at the challenges once again. In the first task, Harry sort of has to win. Winning proves that Harry is a worthy competitor in the tournament, and it just wouldn't make sense for him to have come last. Cedric couldn't come last either, because in the eyes of Hogwarts, he was the true champion, the one truly deserving of a placement in the tournament. If he had gotten last and Harry had gotten first, it just wouldn't have made any sense. This brings us to Krum. Krum was often described and referred to as impressive. If the tournament had started and he kicked things off with a last place finish, it would have been quite unusual. This leaves only Fleur, and though Fleur had arguably the best method of dealing with the dragon, putting it to sleep, making her last sort of came out of plot convenience. This same logic sort of carries on to the second challenge, where Fleur actually fails. One champion had to fail and look bad, so that Harry would be under the impression that people were going to drown. If there wasn't that same sense of urgency, then Harry wouldn't have acted in the way that he did. As for the third challenge, well, she just got unlucky. Third and fourth were reserved for Krum and Fleur, and it just so happens that Fleur was the last to enter, as well as the one who was stunned by Barty Crouch Jr. So again, why did Fleur do so badly? Well, it turns out that by the time the Goblet of Fire rolled around, her character had the smallest relationship to Harry and the tournament. This almost meant that she was destined to fail. In a recreation of the tournament, she actually could have done really well, but if she had, then it just wouldn't have worked as well for the story. And that's it for this video. If you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, you're a wizard, Harry!